The year is 2005. After a long day in school, a room full of ambitious young children, ages 8 through 14, are released to go home. Some anxiously wait for their parents to pick them up. Others rush off to their favorite computer-filled internet cafe to play video games. Two brothers are excited to be able to sit down, get their minds off of school subjects, and finish a challenging level in their favorite computer game, Ragnarok. As they enter the small internet cafe in the down market area of Bangkok, they wave at a few familiar faces they see regularly. Nothing seems out of the ordinary, and they immediately turn on their game and immerse themselves. As the world fades into the background, someone taps one of the brothers on the shoulder. It's a boy not too much older than they are. He leans in and whispers that he has the newest version of this game on a state-of-the-art computer just a few minutes away at his apartment. The boys hesitate momentarily before agreeing to go see this incredible game setup. Just a short walk a few blocks away, the boys climb a flight of stairs to the third floor of an older apartment building. As they approach, both boys are excited and anxious to see this new technology and play the video game like never before. Immediately, upon opening the old door to the apartment, the younger brother glances at the older one. He notices his brother's unusual look of shock and surprise. When he turns his head, he sees a grown man standing there with an odd smile on his face. The man ushers them in and quickly shuts the door. This wasn't the first time this exact turn of events had happened. This evil monster had a habit of this very routine and had become the worst kind of criminal. He was proud of his actions and knew that he could not be caught. Truly the worst kind of human, he would quickly become known as Mr. Swirl. Before the rest of the episode, remember, if you enjoy Freaky What content, click the freaky liker button shaped like a hand. Subscribe to the channel and click the content alarm bell so you know when your favorite freaky content is uploaded. Okay, let's get back to it. It's 2004. And German police were searching a storage unit on a completely unrelated case, looking for evidence. An officer calls over a senior investigator after finding what appears to be a hard drive. They place it in a bag and take it back to the station. A detective grabs a coffee and sits down to review the hard drive. With low expectations, he wants to make sure it doesn't contain anything that would help this case they're currently working on. He begins to look through random photos, and after several containing landscape, random city photos, and pictures of food, he stops clicking. His breathing intensifies, and he forces himself out of the initial shock. It is a photo of a grown man, obviously in his 30s or 40s, with young individuals who are obviously minors. Photo after photo pops up, all containing graphic CP. More than 24 photos are revealed on this hard drive. Each photo not only shows immoral acts, they also clearly show the man taking the picture. Police immediately want to begin an investigation. There's only one problem. The man in the images has taken a photo effect and placed it directly over his face to make only his face a swirl and unrecognizable. They named this unknown monster Mr. Swirl. Police began sending the photo to different agencies in an attempt to decipher the pixels and uncover the identity of Mr. Swirl. As agencies began working on ways to unscramble the photo, this one effect quickly became their most difficult hurdle in this case. Each agency sent the photo to their best people. They would look for ways to recreate the photo and uncover the swirl pattern or rebuild the pixels. As German police continued to investigate, Interpol, or the International Criminal Police Organization, became involved as they had a specific branch dedicated to solving crimes against children. It became apparent through Interpol's investigation that all of the images were from different areas. Each group of images was identified by the background and other clues. Several were taken in Cambodia, many were taken in Vietnam, and others were taken in Thailand. This did not help the search. Instead, it made the search very wide and proved that Mr. Swirl was traveling and performing these acts in different locations and could literally be anywhere. Operation Vico, which stands for Vietnam and Cambodia, as it was known inside Interpol, became priority one for the assigned team. They began searching other locations on the internet for clues, photos, or videos that would get them closer to tracking down Mr. Swirl. As they joined forums and looked through galleries online, they began seeing pictures that looked all too familiar of a man with a swirled face. It seemed that Mr. Swirl was confident that he would not be caught and began posting photos in different predatory groups online. It also seemed that he was proud and showing off to his friends in these sick groups and treated these photos like they were trophies. He wanted to be known by his trademark swirl. Police began finding new photos, bringing the total from a few dozen to over 300. They continued to track as much information as they could based on these uploads. Suddenly, one of the Interpol officers made a startling discovery. Mr. Swirl made a huge mistake. Many of the photos had a clear IP address, which meant in his excitement to upload photos, Mr. Swirl completely forgot to hide his computer's location. A bundle of recently uploaded photos showed that his IP address was located in Vancouver, Canada, which meant he was recently there and clearly had ties to the city. They quickly began to notice a pattern. Mr. Swirl would disappear for a bit online, then reappear and post new photos. The photos would be in one or two places abroad. It seemed as though he was taking trips to places where it was easier to commit these crimes, taking the photos and then returning and posting photos from Canada. This helped build a profile and gave police a lot more information. One morning, 3 years after the investigation began, a member of Interpol began looking at the swirl effect in the photos. He went to grab some water and was discussing the case with a colleague. During the conversation, the swirl effect was brought up, and one of the officers said that it was a pretty well-known effect in a popular photo editing software. They began talking about how easy it was to create the effect on any part of a photo, and how it actually maintained the integrity of all the pixels. In fact, other effects destroy the photo by removing or resizing the pixels, but this swirl effect didn't actually remove or resize any pixel. It just rearranged them in a very predictable swirl. The agent immediately rushed to his computer and downloaded a copy of the photo editing software. He inserted the photo of Mr. Swirl and began searching for the effect. He couldn't believe his eyes when he opened the effect and saw that you could tell it to swirl to the left or swirl to the right. By placing the cursor over the photo and swirling it in the opposite direction, he uncovered the identity, and finally, they had an actual image of this monster named Mr. Swirl. Unswirling photo after photo showed that one man was behind all of the pictures and all of the actions. Now the manhunt was on. Immediately, photos were released to every major news outlet, and the public was asked to reach out to law enforcement with any news on the identification of the man in the pictures. Within hours, the face of Mr. Swirl was literally all over the world, on television and on the internet. It didn't take long before calls began coming in. In less than 48 hours, Mr. Swirl's true identity was revealed. Christopher Paul Neal is a Canadian. At the time of his identity being uncovered and these horrible crimes being committed, he was only 32 years old. There are a few details that make this already sick story even more sinister. Christopher Paul Neal wanted to become a priest. So, in 1998, he graduated from a seminary in Mission, British Columbia with an arts degree. However, he failed the qualification requirements to enter the Catholic priesthood. So, instead, he chose to teach children. Christopher Paul Neal was working as a children's English teacher in Thailand when a multitude of the photos surfaced. Investigators believe that Neal influenced many children as their teacher and planned the abuse from the very beginning. He would most likely find the students he could influence the most and groom each of them to have full control of the situation. His manipulation went far beyond the photos in question. In fact, many of the children were used to lure in more unsuspecting victims so that he could keep his distance and still have total control. In order to cover his tracks, Christopher Neal traveled often and never uploaded photos from his personal computer. In fact, it was found out that on one occasion that we know of, he broke into his brother's computer while staying at his house. Then he uploaded dozens of explicit illegal images to the dark web so that it would come back on his brother if anyone ever tracked the upload IP address. As the manhunt continued, Christopher Neal was finally tracked down. Authorities learned that he was in South Korea, so they sent officers to arrest him. When the officers arrived, he was gone. Neal fled immediately upon seeing his image on the news. Officials began following CCTV images and videos captured from airports, streets, and rental car companies. Each video gave them more information into his location. After many videos were sent to the authorities from an area in Thailand, it was then obvious that Christopher Neal was hiding out there. Going off of a tip, officers stopped by an abandoned house to search for signs that Christopher had been staying there. When officers entered, they found Christopher Paul Neal hiding. The hunt was finally over. After being arrested, this monster was charged in Thailand with the assault of the young boys at the internet cafe. At the time, this was the only case they could build with solid evidence and testimony. At his sentencing in Thailand, the world watched anxiously, waiting for the hammer to drop. Christopher Paul Neal was sentenced to only 5 years. After Neal served his time in Thailand, Thai authorities planned to deport Neal to Canada so that he could be tried for his crimes in his own country. Many prosecutors saw this as an opportunity for Neal to spend life in jail in each of the countries where he had committed these horrific crimes against minors. In 2012, Christopher Paul Neal was released from Thai prison. He boarded a plane to be deported to Canada, where he would be tried again and hopefully serve time for his crimes. This next part is what I would call a freaky turn of events that no one saw coming. Once Neal was back in Canada and he went before the court system, he was told that he had to register as a sex offender, he could not own any device that connected to the internet, and he had to keep his distance from anywhere children may be, such as schools and parks. If he did these things, he was able to go free. Even though there were hundreds of horrible, explicit photos with Christopher Paul Neal and minors in them, and even though he left a trail of innocent victims in other countries, the Canadian government decided that this monster could be trusted to obey their stipulations and walk free in the streets of Canada. About a year after Christopher Neal was released, a probation officer went to check on him to ensure that he was still following the conditions of his probation. Upon looking around Neal's apartment, the officer found a laptop. When he asked Neal why he had a laptop, as it was an obvious violation of his probation, Christopher said that he was writing a book about his life. After taking the laptop in for further inspection, the police found more than 25 images of CP on the computer, all just as explicit as before, and some still having his trademark swirl face. A more in-depth investigation revealed that he had accessed the deep web, learned how to post and share untraceable content with his criminal friends, and had possibly been involved in more criminal acts. Christopher Neal was arrested and brought before the courts once again. As the public looked on, fully expecting a sentence that would send a message to monsters like Neal, Christopher appeared before a judge. This time the judge looked at Neal and said, "I sentence you to 5.5 years in prison with time served." Yes, you heard me right. Christopher Paul Neal, even though he proved that he could not be trusted and showed the police that he wanted to continue committing crimes, he would only spend a little over 14 months in prison for all he had done. As of 2016, the monster Christopher Paul Neal is a free man living among people in Vancouver, Canada. Unfortunately, hundreds of pictures prove that this horrible man abused many children and committed horrible acts. However, these were considered non-prosecutable because they were in other countries and many victims could not be located. While this case is extremely disturbing, I think it's important that we remain aware of creeps and monsters like Christopher Neal. He and many others like him are still out there. We must remain vigilant and protect our families, our children, and ourselves against criminals like this. I'm curious to know what you think about this case. What is your opinion of the freaky sentence that they gave and the fact that he is a free man?